Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, family members, and those watching from home, welcome to the graduation of the Army National Guard Non-Career Recruiter Course Class 20-002. I am Sergeant First Class Jessica Hauser from the Strength Maintenance Training Center, and it is my pleasure to serve as your Master of Ceremonies. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the entrance of the official party. The official party consists of Lieutenant Colonel Floyd Rowland, Sergeant First Class Robert Payton, Mr. Roger Easley, Sergeant First Class Bradley Patty, Mr. Mark Parker, Sergeant First Class Griffin Dickerson, Sergeant First Class Thomas Paul, Sergeant First Class Tanya Bushy, and Sergeant First Class Daryl Gibson. Please remain standing for the national anthem and the invocation by Chaplain Brian Kiefit.
Would you please join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, it is with great pride and excitement that we offer these graduates up to you. We give you full credit for their academic achievement and petition you, asking that after the conclusion of this ceremony, that you would continually sustain them as they are charged with continually sustaining the strength of our ranks. I ask that you would give them your eyes, not to see each potential recruit as just a person to enlist, but rather a living and breathing soul that needs to have their future in the National Guard revealed to them. We thank you for your sacrifice on our behalf. We thank you for the sacrifice of all those who have come before us. Help us to live our lives and careers in a manner honoring to that sacrifice. All glory and honor and praise be to you and you only. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Kiefit. Please be seated. Our guest speaker today, Lieutenant Colonel Floyd Rowland, currently serves the Utah Army and Air National Guard as the Utah National Guard Senior Enlisted Leader. Lieutenant Colonel Rowland is assigned as the Recruiting and Retention Commander for the Oklahoma Army National Guard. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Organizational Leadership from Southern Nazarene University and a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership from the University of Oklahoma. He began his military career in 1986 in the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He completed Forward Observer Training, Naval Gunfire Course, and the Close Air Support School in 1987, then the Platoon Leaders Course in 1989. After returning from the Gulf War, he transitioned to active duty and was assigned to recruiting duty, where he served until his discharge in 1994. Lieutenant Colonel Rowland joined the Oklahoma Army National Guard in 1997 and received a direct commission in 1999. He graduated from the Armor Officer course in 2000 and Infantry Company Command course in 2005, Combined Armed Service Support School in 2005, Command and General Staff course in 2010, and the Advanced Operations course in 2014. His leadership and staff positions include Rifle Platoon Leader, Rifle Company Commander, Battalion S4, Squadron Executive Officer, and Brigade S1. In 2007, Lieutenant Colonel Rowland began working in recruiting. He has served as the Resource Manager, Operations and Training Officer, Officer Strength Manager, and Executive Officer. He assumed command of the Oklahoma Recruiting and Retention Battalion in March 2018. Lieutenant Colonel Rowland has been awarded the Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Navy Commendation Medal with V device, the Combat Infantry Badge, the National Defense Service Medal with 1 Service Star, the Southwest Asia Service Medal with 3 Campaign Stars, the Afghan Campaign Medal with 3 Campaign Stars, and several other federal and state awards. He and his wife, Lieutenant Colonel Tanya Rowland, reside in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and have 2 sons and a daughter-in-law. Airman First Class Matthew and Lydia Rowland, Monterey, California, and Specialist Paul Rowland, Cambridge, England. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Lieutenant Colonel Floyd Rowland.
Thank you. Push all the buttons I was told to push. There we go. Well, relax. Big breath. Today's here. You made it. This is it. Kind of like on the Tonight Show, right? This is it. You made it. Ready to go. I promise as I stand between you and graduation, I'll try to keep my comments brief. I just want to tell you that I want to say thank you to the SMTC for asking me to come out here. Major Carlos Woodard, a good friend of mine, asked me to come out and speak. Very, very pleased to do that. I'm glad to be here. Nothing motivates me more than being around recruiters because you do provide the lifeblood, the end strength of our service. It's vital, the role that you're going to do, and I can't tell you, I love doing it. I've got one of my regional commanders here with me today, one thing I hear a lot of times is stay away from my recruiters, get away from my business, because I love to go. I love to go to the storefronts, drop in. It is my passion. As you probably heard from my bio, I've been in recruiting for a long time. I've been a production recruiter, although for another service, and then I've been in recruiting with the National Guard now. This is beginning about my 15th year in recruiting in some form or fashion. Love it. So just wanted to tell you my agenda, because I will not go over my time limit. I promise you that. So what I want to do is just tell you my 2 points. That's all I have right up front in case I run short. One, what I want to share with you today is be a National Guard soldier first. Be a soldier first and a guardsman. And the number 2 point I'm going to talk to you about is be about the business we hired you to do. And so I'll hop right in. As you can hear from the bio, I like to brag about my kids. Both of them have joined the service. My wife went out and joined the Army Reserve after 9/11 happened, we live that kind of lifestyle. And I want to start by telling you this is a lifestyle. If you signed up thinking you've got an 8-hour-a-day job, 40 hours a week, you're wrong. It's a lifestyle. You have to embrace that. Everywhere you go, embrace it. You might as well give your spouse a handful of your business cards, because when your spouse is out, they ought to be passing out those cards as well. When you're at the grocery store 10:30 in the evening, you're still on the job. Everywhere you go from now on is on the job. It's a lifestyle. So when I go to drill now, right, I get up and I go to drill, whoop, and I am stopped. I usually get up on drill weekend because we're in the Guard. We still have to go to drill weekend. And I go stop at my convenience store. I get a cup of coffee. Monday through Friday when I stop, they think I live close to Tinker Air Force Base. They just think I'm in the Air Force. But on the weekends, they know right away. And they say, "Oh, you must be in the National Guard." And I say, "Yes, I am. I'm very proud to be in the National Guard. As a matter of fact, I'm a recruiter for the National Guard. Would you like to be in or know somebody who does?" I ask every time. And I say that, and I think it's important because I've been with other AGR soldiers, and maybe you have too, when they get out and somebody says, "Are you in the National Guard?" And they say, "Yeah, but I'm an AGR soldier." Those guys are weekend, they do the weekend thing, I go out and train. And I was always taken aback by how many people in the AGR system wanted to make it different, make sure that everybody knew that I do this full time and not the weekend. I'll tell you, do never be ashamed of being a guardsman first. That part-time soldier, that traditional soldier that we all started out to be, that's the lifeblood of our business. That's what we do. Those are the people that I love to be around because they're the citizen soldiers that we're looking for. They're the ones who went out and putting in a 40-hour week or going to school somewhere and then showing up on the weekend to do this because they want to. I'll tell you this. I think of what you do just like I tell the RSP soldiers that I send to boot camp every Monday and Tuesday. It's a hero story. If you've ever watched a hero movie, whether it be Star Wars, whether it be a Harry Potter, I don't know how depending on your age range, wherever you're at in life, whatever that hero story is, if you're a person of faith, you have a lot of examples of hero stories. But a hero story is much like yours. Somebody is drawn to that. When an applicant is sitting in front of you, I want you to understand first and foremost, they didn't show up there because you had the best college benefits. There was 12 other people that had a way to pay for college. You may have the best. There was 12 other ways to do it. People are drawn to service. When people come in, that is a calling, just like it was for you. They are called and drawn to sit in front of you. And then it's your job to convince them that we are the place that they want to serve. But that young applicant, just like yourself, makes that decision, and then somebody has to guide them. Somebody has to be that guide. You know, Luke Skywalker has to have an Obi-Wan Kenobi. And you're going to be that person that starts to guide them through this process of getting into the military. And then, depending on how your state runs the RSP, you may hand them off, or you may continue to help guide them while they're preparing to leave for boot camp. And then we're going to explain to them that, hey, boot camp is just the forge. It's where we're going to really kind of put the iron in the fire so we can bring it out sharp, razor sharp. And that's going to be your job, is to explain to them how that they fit into that hero story. And I want you to know that at the end of that hero story, there's always an adversary. And our adversary is fear and doubt. For them, it's going to be going to boot camp. For you today, because you're my heroes, fear and doubt might be what's faced of you, the mission ahead of you. It's tough. It's a tough job. And that takes me to my second point. I want you to be about the business you were hired to do. So, there's a lot of things that go into this business. You've spent the last few weeks learning all the things that go into making a recruiter and a successful program. When you get home, you're going to have at least 3 people, your NCOIC, your sergeant major, and your battalion commander, who want to know one thing. How many people did you put in the Guard this month? I want you to make no doubt about it. This business is about putting people in the Guard. People come to this, I say a lot of soldiers come to recruiting, and they come from marketing backgrounds, and they want to get the word out, and that's great. At the end of the month, it's about putting somebody in the Guard. And I want you to keep that in mind. I will say that several times. Know this, you're going to fail at some point. In all the things that we're going to ask you to do, you will fail somewhere. There will be something you suck at. And so as we start talking to you about all the things that you've got to do to be a successful recruiter, there's going to be one thing that you must not fail at, and that's prospecting. You must not fail at prospecting. Every day you got to get up and you got to make the phone calls that you maybe you suck at phone calls. Tough. You got to make them anyway. Maybe you're shy about social media. Too bad. You got to make those tweets anyway. You don't like school presentations? Get over it. You got to make the school presentations. Prospecting is something that we cannot afford for you to fail at. I can afford for you to roll a donut 1 month, as long as I can see that pipeline is full. But man, if I look out and I can see that there is nothing in your pipeline, that you are not prospecting, that kind of gives me an indication that we're laying down. So I'm telling you, you can fail at many things. You can suck at many of those activities, but you can't not do them. You must not fail at prospecting. Prospecting is the business. We got to be about the business we're hired to do, and that is the business we're hired to do. Follow the process. I want to tell you this. So to tell you to go prospecting and be about prospecting, we should also say here's how to do it. So you've been given the process. You've been taught the 5-1-2-1+1. You've been given the guidebook, 6011. There's all the resources that you need to know to how to do this job. Follow the process. You're going to come to a point where you're going to think, I'm ready to do this on my own. I've got my own way of doing it. Follow the process. It's going to be especially important when the times get tough. And then you start to wonder, what did I do? What am I not doing? What am I doing wrong? Well, go back to the process. We taught you a process. Follow that process. So I love my favorite actor, Denzel Washington. Listen to him. He's got a quote, and I think he said he got it from his wife, said, to get something you never had, you have to do something you never did. All right, so we're going to ask you to do a lot of uncomfortable things. We're going to ask you to go out every day, and 100 times a day, we're going to ask you to ask somebody else to join the Guard. And you're going to get told no 99 times. That's kind of that failure. You're going to have to get used to that. But you're looking for that one yes, where that success is at. But in order to get to that one, you're probably going to have to do some things that you never did before to get there. And you're going to have to do that daily and daily, daily. Prospecting. It's all about that prospecting, whether it's be phone, social media, high school presentations, COIs, you got to be about that. And I'll tell you this, when it comes to that consistency of doing this job, my greatest fear as a commander is having to think how many recruiters I have laying in their beds on Sunday morning, looking up at the ceiling, thinking, what in the hell am I doing on Monday? I don't want you to ever be that person. Have a plan. Work the plan. That plan is vitally important because Monday will come. Monday will come. I hope that you never have those Mondays where you're sitting there laying, what am I going to do? Have that plan. The plan is if you can be consistent with that plan and work the plan, be very, very diligent about working the plan. That consistency will get you through. It's going to be there because the tough times are going to come. The suck is going to be there. You got to work the plan to get through that. The last thing that I want to tell you is I want you to listen to the person inside of you. Because you're sitting here today wearing a uniform. That means at some point, the person that lives on the inside of us is a very confident person that thinks that we can do anything. It's a resilient person that overcomes most everything. It's a very forward-thinking person that has the best in our interest. And it's a person inside of us that doesn't quit. I'm reminded when I think about this person inside of us of a scripture that I was taught. It says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Listen, recruiters, you will have days when you get up on Monday and you're going to be, this person inside of you knows what to do, knows to go work a plan and be diligent and consistent about working that plan. But you're going to be one behind and you don't have any prospect for this week. And the flesh in you is going to be very weak. The flesh is going to say, man, it's time to give it up. I'm telling you, listen to the person inside of you. The reason I know you have it is because you're wearing this uniform now. There was a time when we tried you. We put you through the forge. We put you through boot camp. And you had to listen to that person inside of you then. You had to let that very resilient and confident person shine through in order to get through boot camp, to wear the uniform you're doing now, to get through all the deployments. I see some of you have several deployments. Let that person shine through every day. Let that person become the person you are. Confident, resilient, that person can overcome the Monday. Discipline and consistency is what I should just leave with you. Be disciplined in working your plan, consistent in working your plan. And then the last thing, don't confuse your movement with progress. So you're going to get out there and doing a lot of this stuff. I'm making a lot of phone calls. I'm going to a lot of schools. How many people are you asking to join the Guard? I've got too busy working my plan. Well, the plan leads you to ask somebody to join the Guard. Listen, you can get really busy in this job very quickly, doing a lot of things that do not lead to success. So do not confuse movement and a lot of activity with success and with progress. Be about the business we hired you to do. Prospect, prospect, prospect. Put somebody in the Guard at the end of every month. Thanks for your time today. I got my high sign. I'm going over my time. Thanks for having me here. Sergeant House, appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you for those words of encouragement, Lieutenant Colonel Rowland. The instructors for 1st Platoon were Sergeant 1st Class Robert Payton and Mr. Chris Burks. At this time, Sergeant First Class Payton will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students receive their diploma.
Well, 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 first platoon. We made it 5 weeks. I got 9 to 13 minutes here, so just bear with me. You know I'm lying. No, and all jokes aside, it's been an honor for myself, Mr. Burks, get you through these 5 weeks, set the foundation. So when you get back home, work that foundation, build up, develop your program, and you'll be leaders as I know you are, okay? First platoon, prepare to graduate.
Staff Sergeant Acevero. Sergeant Aguero. Sergeant Alvarez. Staff Sergeant Armstrong. Sergeant Arnold. Staff Sergeant Avery. Sergeant Bob. Sergeant First Class Bab. Sergeant Balcazar. Sergeant Barnes. Staff Sergeant Berrigan. Sergeant Bay. Sergeant Bell. Sergeant Bennett. Staff Sergeant Biggs. Specialist Books. Sergeant Bryant. Sergeant Bushnell. Staff Sergeant Burgess. Sergeant Boucher. First Platoon Platoon Sergeant is Sergeant First Class Roman Azuzu. Sergeant First Class Azuzu will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Azuzu will now address his platoon for the last time.
First platoon, good job. Let's get to work.
The instructors for Second Platoon were Mr. Roger Easley and Mr. Mark Geesey. At this time, Mr. Easley will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
I'm loud and I don't need the mic. Guys, today when you leave here, I want you to travel safely home. Love your babies when you get there. Reconnect with your family. Remember everything we did for 5 weeks. The last thing I want you to carry with you is this. You have a problem. You have a decision to make. What do? We look at the watch. We see our face in that watch. Okay, then it's up to you because that reflects you, your family, and the Army National Guard. Make the right decision. Second platoon, prepare, graduate.
Specialist Blankenship. Staff Sergeant Buteau Tomeo. Sergeant Bird. Staff Sergeant Serta. Staff Sergeant Chavez. Sergeant Clark. Staff Sergeant Clare. Staff Sergeant Collier. Sergeant Crossley. Staff Sergeant Curry. Sergeant Delatorre. Sergeant DeMoss. Staff Sergeant Dicker. Sergeant Dietrich. Sergeant Diliberto. Sergeant Moser. Second platoon, platoon sergeant is Sergeant First Class Sean Clark. Sergeant First Class Clark will also be receiving a certificate of excellence. Sergeant First Class Clark will address his platoon for the last time. The instructors for 3rd Platoon were Sergeant First Class Bradley Patty and Mr. John Winters. At this time, Sergeant First Class Patty will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
All right, 3rd Platoon. So, I've taught you many things. What did I tell you that our job is to do? Staff the Army. Outstanding. You'll do that with the 3-tenant mission, right? If you keep that in mind, you're going to be successful. We're not just a prospect, but also to get them to MEPS, then to get them to basic training, then to get them to AIT, and then to get them to the unit. Roger that? All right, staff the Army and keep up the good work. Cool? Third platoon, prepare, graduate.
Sergeant DeVicentis. Sergeant Draper. Sergeant Elia. Sergeant Elliott. Staff Sergeant Ellis. Sergeant Everett. Sergeant Ferguson. Sergeant Furman. Staff Sergeant Flaherty. Sergeant Ford. Staff Sergeant Gabbard. Sergeant Gagnon. Sergeant Gaines. Staff Sergeant Gillen. Specialist Gonzalez. Sergeant Greenhill. Sergeant Gutierrez. Sergeant Hall. Staff Sergeant Ham. Sergeant Harding. Third Platoon, Platoon Sergeant is Sergeant First Class Eric Ganon. Sergeant First Class Ganon will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Ganon will address the platoon for the last time.
Started 21 strong. I appreciate y'all. We're all here together. Take the 59. Get the witchy, did you?
The instructors for 4th Platoon were Mr. Mark Parker and Mr. Brutus Carter. At this time, Mr. Parker will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
Good morning. On behalf of your instructors, we want to say congratulations, but most importantly, thank you for being NCOs in and outside the classroom for the last 5 weeks. 1,920 is exactly the number that this graduating class has the ability to impact the lives in your community if you all average 1 enlistment per month for the next year. That's a half a brigade combat team that can defend this great nation. Most importantly, moving forward from today, you have the ability to make that major impact in your community. But we, the National Guard, challenge you to see how far you can make that footprint. 4th Platoon, prepare to graduate.
Sergeant Hare. Staff Sergeant Harkins. Sergeant Harvey. Sergeant Hebert. Sergeant First Class Henninger. Staff Sergeant Henry. Staff Sergeant Hyatt. Sergeant First Class Hofer. Specialist Hoffman. Sergeant Honorato. Sergeant First Class Arenzi. Staff Sergeant Jeffcoat. Sergeant Johnson. Staff Sergeant Johnsted. Staff Sergeant Kerr. Sergeant Clem. Sergeant Leftwich. Sergeant First Class Mailing. Fourth Platoon Platoon Sergeant is Sergeant First Class Eric Hutchinson. Sergeant First Class Hutchinson will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Hutchinson will now address his platoon for the last time.
Mr. Parker, sound off. Every day I'm hustling. Take a seat.
The instructors for 5th Platoon were Sergeant First Class Griffin Dickerson and Mr. Michael Smith. At this time, Sergeant First Class Dickerson will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
Fifth platoon, I just want to let you know that you're the greatest class we've had this far in this calendar year. But on a serious note, from the beginning, me and Mr. Smith, we asked you to buy in to the information that we're teaching you, and obviously it was effective because we had no academic failures. When you go back home, take the lessons that you learned, and make sure to use your people skills to be successful, and have a very strong work ethic. Fifth platoon, prepare to graduate.
Sergeant Kong. Staff Sergeant Lagan. Sergeant Lane. Sergeant Lang. Sergeant Langy. Staff Sergeant Lapane. Sergeant Lonstein. Sergeant Lee. Staff Sergeant Love. Staff Sergeant Lovegreen. Sergeant Lucero. Sergeant Mugadayo. Sergeant Mehan. Sergeant Martinez. Sergeant Matthews. Staff Sergeant McCormick. Sergeant McMahon. Sergeant McMillan. Specialist Miller. Staff Sergeant Ward. Fifth Platoon Platoon Sergeant is Staff Sergeant Carlo Martinez. Staff Sergeant Martinez will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Staff Sergeant Martinez will now address his platoon for the last time.
Fifth platoon, it's been a great 5 weeks. Have fun out there recruiting.
The instructors for 6th Platoon were Sergeant First Class Thomas Paul and Mr. William Law. At this time, Sergeant First Class Paul will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
Clap it up, 6th. 6th Platoon, privileged to be here, humbled as your instructor. I hope you've learned just as much from me as I have from you what it is to be a great NCO leader that will make you a great recruiter. So without further ado, let's get down to the real reason we came here. Let's take a 10-minute break. I'm just kidding. 6th Platoon, prepare to graduate.
Specialist Jeju. Sergeant Fouth. Staff Sergeant Miller. Staff Sergeant Nagy. Sergeant Newsom-Murray. Sergeant Apperman. Sergeant Patrick. Sergeant First Class Paul. Sergeant Peckert. Specialist Pilkington. Staff Sergeant Poirier. Sergeant Rasden. Sergeant Reeves. Sergeant Reinhardt. Sergeant Rizzardi. Sergeant Robinson. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Sergeant Ross. Sergeant Roth. Sergeant Rowland. Sergeant Russo. Sergeant Samuel. Sergeant Santitovich. Sixth Platoon Platoon Sergeant is Sergeant First Class Matthew Napper. Sergeant First Class Napper will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Napper will now address his platoon for the last time.
6th Platoon, from day one we said 6th Platoon would lead the way. We're graduating 24 assigned, 24 present. Your GPA speaks for itself. You internalized the Army values, the NCO creed, and your professionalism was unmatched. But this time, it's time to go and get it. 6th Platoon, 24 assigned, 24 present. 6th Platoon, leads the way. Junior, 6th Platoon!
Thank you. The instructors for 7th Platoon were Sergeant First Class Tanya Bushy and Sergeant First Class Jessica Hauser. At this time, Sergeant First Class Bushy will address her platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
7th Platoon. It's been an interesting 5 weeks, I say the least. Had a little sickness, been a little healthy at times. We've come in late, we've stayed late. I appreciate you for 5 weeks. And you know that as soon as you leave, you're on the street. It's all you. So, remember the lessons you've learned here. Appreciate that your peers are still there, your instructors are still there, and that you can be a great recruiter and a great NCO. 7th Platoon, prepare to graduate.
Staff Sergeant Savino. Specialist Schumacher. Sergeant Sexton. Specialist Schumann. Sergeant Seeley. Corporal Smith. Sergeant Speck. Sergeant Spinazzola. Sergeant Steinke. Sergeant Stetham. Sergeant Stockman. Staff Sergeant Stratton. Staff Sergeant Summersgill. Sergeant Swanson. Sergeant Taylor. Specialist Thompson. Seventh Platoon, Platoon Sergeant is Sergeant First Class Devin Smith. Sergeant First Class Smith will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Smith will now address his platoon for the last time.
I just want to say congratulations to you guys. It's been a pleasure working with you all. I've had fun. It's been real. But it's time to go on board. 7th Platoon. Mark complete.
The instructors for 8th Platoon were Sergeant First Class Daryl Gibson and Mr. Ed Goff. At this time, Sergeant First Class Gibson will address his platoon for the last time. The awarding of the diplomas and badges will follow. Please hold your applause until all students have received their diploma.
Morning, 8th Platoon. Thank you for being a great class. Thank you for having high moral character and professionalism. I do appreciate it. Having intentionality for being professional, taking care of soldiers, and being a non-commissioned officer. Congratulations and good luck. 8th Platoon, prepare to graduate.
Sergeant Arjet Singer. Sergeant Blom. Sergeant Travis. Sergeant Trujillo. Sergeant Bakiner. Specialist Valdez Masu. Staff Sergeant Van Tiger. Sergeant Varcoa. Staff Sergeant Vivier Jr. Specialist Wagner. Specialist Walker. Sergeant Wanamaker. Sergeant Westfall. Sergeant Williams. Staff Sergeant Willis. Staff Sergeant Willis II. Sergeant Wilson. Staff Sergeant Wright. Specialist Zenatellis. Staff Sergeant Zerwas. Eighth Platoon Platoon Sergeant is Sergeant First Class Kevin Wheeler. Sergeant First Class Wheeler will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Wheeler will address his platoon for the last time.
8th Platoon, it's been a pleasure getting to know all of you. Thank you for making my job easy for the most part. I wish you all the best of luck and take care. Happy Christmas.
At this time, we will recognize the soldiers that made the Commandant's List by graduating with an academic grade point average in the top 20% of the class. If I call your name, please stand. Sergeant Arjet Singer. Sergeant Bay. Sergeant Blom. Staff Sergeant Burgess. Sergeant First Class Clark. Staff Sergeant Clare. Staff Sergeant Curry. Staff Sergeant Dicker. Specialist Jeju. Sergeant DeVicentis. Sergeant Elliott. Sergeant Everett. Sergeant Foth. Sergeant Greenhill. Sergeant Gutierrez. Sergeant Hare. Sergeant Kerr. Sergeant McCormick. Sergeant McMahon. Staff Sergeant Miller. Sergeant First Class Napper. Sergeant Newsom-Murray. Sergeant Opperman. Sergeant Patrick. Sergeant First Class Paul. Sergeant Reeves. Sergeant Russo. Sergeant Sexton. Specialist Schumann. Sergeant Travis. Specialist Valdez Masu. Staff Sergeant Vantiger. Sergeant Varhua. Specialist Walker. Sergeant Wanamaker. And Staff Sergeant Wright. These are your Commandant's List for Class 20-002. You may now be seated. At this time, we will recognize the soldiers with the highest academic soldier with the highest academic average, or as we call it, the Distinguished Honor Graduate. This class's Distinguished Honor Graduate is Sergeant First Class Matthew Paul, with an overall academic average of 98.6%. At this time, we will recognize the soldier with the highest Army Physical Fitness Test score, or as we call it, the Iron Soldier Award. This class's Iron Soldier is Sergeant Annalise Foth, with a total score of 300 on her APFT. The student First Sergeant Young Hall, is Sergeant First Class Brian Henninger. Sergeant First Class Henninger will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. And now, Sergeant First Class Henninger will address the class for the last time.
Personally, I just want to say thank you for being a great company. We started off with 89 soldiers in the beginning, and we ended graduating today 79. one of the accomplishments I wanted to point out was that this is the first time in my military career that I went to a school where we had 0 APFT failures. 0. That's awesome. That's great things. And that's credit upon yourselves. All right? And I want to make sure you guys understand you exemplify everything in the NCO creed. The two things that we always look at is accomplishment of the mission, which we're doing right now. We're accomplishing the mission, and it's really not accomplished until we get home with our families. So let's make sure we accomplish that mission and that task, and the welfare of our soldiers. Every one of you guys took care of each other and made it possible. You made it easy for me as a first sergeant. And I want to thank the platoon sergeants. Everybody, have a safe trip home. And again, have a successful career as a recruiter. Thank you.
The student first sergeant for Lexington Hall is Sergeant First Class Matthew Paul. Sergeant First Class Paul will also be receiving a Certificate of Excellence. Sergeant First Class Paul will address the class for the last time.
I just want to thank all of you for being professionals. Every single one of you. Be safe getting home. Godspeed to all of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the graduates will now have 5 minutes to choose someone to pin their newly awarded badge. Graduates, you have 2 minutes remaining. You have 2 minutes remaining. Graduates, you have 1 minute remaining. Graduates, you have 1 minute remaining. I think they heard me. Yeah, they're moving. Graduates, it is now time to take your seats. It is now time to take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Class 20-002, Army National Guard Non-Career Recruiter Course, graduates. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the exit of the official party.
Plan 20-002. You are